The series was going, but then ESPN ended up canceling it because the NFL disliked the way that NFL players are being portrayed in the show.
One of the most controversial shows in sports history.
You got this show about football. The NFL already doesn't like it. Ratings were excellent.
A show that tackled the NFL's biggest controversies, attracting millions of viewers per episode. However, at the peak of the show's success, the NFL would force ESPN to cancel the show. Now for a quick word from our sponsor. Looking for something to eat before the video starts, but can't seem to find anything? Don't fear, Factor 75 is here. Factor is a meal delivery service that delivers delicious, fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your door. Ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Factor offers a plethora of meal options for every lifestyle, from keto, calorie smart, to vegan, and some extra protein options as well. Factor makes it easy for me to make healthy choices, and with fast food prices skyrocketing, the choice to go with Factor becomes easier and easier. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code DS50 to get 50% off your first Factor box, and free wellness shots for life. 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you're an active subscriber. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code DS50 to get 50% off your first Factor box, and free wellness shots for life. 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you're an active subscriber. A big thanks to Factor 75, and now let's get back to the video.
The NFL is in the news tonight, bombarded for months with bad news, negative headlines.
A former NFL player will spend the next 6 months in jail after beating his girlfriend.
Just found in boxers, but in increasing numbers of football players, even causing some people to question the future of the NFL.
Premiering in 2003, Playmakers shattered the traditional sports programming mold. The show took viewers beyond the glamour of the game, exploring the personal lives and struggles of fictional players on the Cougars, a professional football team. The comparisons it drew to the NFL were clear to see. The insight it gave fans into life as an NFL player made it an instant hit, but it would also prove to be its downfall. There's no doubt that ESPN has played a huge role in the history and growth of the NFL, for which they were praised by Paul Tagliabue, the former commissioner of the NFL. In a documentary about the network, he said that ESPN was able to take the draft, the pregame and highlight shows, and other NFL programming to a new level. Playmakers could be viewed as an experiment by ESPN. The network, which was most famously known for its sports broadcasting, was dabbling in the unknown by committing to a drama-based television program. It broke new ground, giving fans a completely new look at their favorite sport. It was truly a first of its kind, but the show didn't come without pushing some boundaries. Drug abuse, domestic violence, murder, and of course, football made the show something of an enigma, and its heightened drama made it an instant hit with fans. The script, which was originally pitched to the network FX, really had it all. The tropes and stereotypes that fans could associate with the professional game were clear to see, but the darker sides of footballers' lives is what made it so controversial. The creator John Eisendrath did a sit-down interview with Vice in 2015, in which he discussed his motivations for the show and his thoughts about its eventual demise. He claims that his motive was never to antagonize the NFL, but that his inspiration really came from a desire to share the unique relationships that men have with each other. He said, "It was a show about men, set in a background that I thought was a great one to dramatize. A sports locker room sees men at their highest, their lowest, and everything in between, making it the perfect setting for a gripping television drama." Eisendrath said, "The NFL is a grotesquely authoritarian world that frowns on individuality, so what a great place to put a show that highlights people's desires to be who they are." He was correct in his estimation that the show would be a success, as it ranked as the most popular show on the network, aside from Sunday Night Football. It is easy to forget that athletes are real people with real issues. Life for sports stars doesn't simply get put on hold when they exit the football field or our television screens. There are dramas that play out in every single locker room, and the Playmakers series set about sharing some of those issues with viewers. The writers had all experienced life within a sports team during their younger years, and the green light from ESPN allowed them to lift the lid on what the general population of sports fans never get to see. Whilst they never claimed, they never used real-life professional sporting examples as inspiration for storylines. They wrote the show by applying common sense to general sporting situations and news stories. Their nuanced ability to do this meant they would end up foreshadowing some of the NFL's biggest and most controversial headlines to break over the following couple of decades. There is no doubt that Playmakers was groundbreaking, but perhaps the skill of the writers was the true cause of their downfall. In producing a gripping and controversial dramatization of the nation's favorite sport, they accidentally uncovered the ugly truths that kept the whole thing ticking along.
I hit this guy clean. Everybody who plays football gets hurt, one way or another.
The opening scene shows linebacker Eric Olczyk visiting the hospital room of a player he had paralyzed with a hard hit. Eric's trouble in dealing with the consequences of his actions would become a theme throughout the series. It led to doubts about his ability to retake the field, and eventually saw him pass up the opportunity to continue getting therapy for his post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD. The second scene in the very first episode shows running back Leon Taylor taking an injection into his knee in an attempt to speed up his recovery from an ACL tear. The presence of a newly drafted talent at his position was applying the pressure and making him anxious to get back and show he still had it. The turmoil that this placed on him would lead to mental anguish, a dabble with performance-enhancing drugs, and family issues. As previously stated, the show wastes no time in getting stuck into the hard-hitting issues, and definitely pushed the boundary for ESPN. The two opening scenes of the series aren't focused on fame, glory, or athletic prowess. Instead, they set the tone for a show that dealt with some of life's harsh realities, addressing the hardships that players have to contend with off the field. Battling against inner demons and basing decisions on dangerous motivations would become a consistent theme of Playmakers.
The life expectancy of the average American is 76. Life expectancy of a pro football player is 58. No shit. It's not easy cutting 20% off your life.
Episode 2 gives viewers a better introduction to the team's quarterback, Derek McConnell. Endless weeks of brutal hits and the dangerous reality of being a professional signal caller had turned McConnell into a broken man. Viewers find him in the locker room, popping pills like they are candy, but they are taken away from him and is forced to submit to a doctor's examination. As he drags himself to the examination, the character's narration explains how he now opts for flip-flops as his choice of footwear.
You wear slippers because you can't bend over to tie your shoes. You're 26, and for days after the game you shuffle like an old man.
Because he is no longer able to bend down to tie his own shoelaces. Of course, injuries are a major part of any professional sport, but the physicality of the gridiron puts a very serious strain on players, and is one of the most injury-riddled sports in the world. Midweek training reports are closely followed by fans and journalists alike. A mention of a mild knee sprain or concussion can set the nerves jangling in fans who want to see their players take the field. But little thought is given to what that report means behind closed doors. The players in question are often fighting to play through an injury suffered just days earlier, and the pressure they face to do so, especially the stars, is often overlooked. Playmakers paints its picture of life behind these closed doors by showing a banged up Derek McConnell resisting medical help, taking blame from his coach, and dealing with it by succumbing to an addiction to anti-inflammatory painkillers. The inner monologue from the quarterback explains that he expects to take about 200 sacks across a 10-year career, and that each sack is worth a month taken off his life expectancy. This information shared during his narration comes during a scene where he is blamed for it in front of the team. The Cougars coach Mike George highlights his tendency to hold on to the ball for too long as a reason for taking the punishment. The criticism and lack of care about the player's well-being is another consistent theme to emerge, as Playmakers portrays the impact that this can have in forcing players to fight through injuries and not want to appear weak in front of their teammates or fans. In episode 2, for example, McConnell is shown to go against the doctor's wishes by tricking another player into handing over his painkillers. In the same episode, young running back Demetrius Harris finds out the hard way that his habits were going to need to change fast. His battle with veteran Leon Taylor for the starting job is one of the key storylines of the show. After getting the best of the veteran in practice, practice, Harris goes big in his first game and leads the team to victory. Amidst the celebrations, Harris finds out that he will be getting a visit from the Piss Man, a drug testing official. The young running back is a hell of a player, but he is also a party goer whose taste for drugs had turned into a full-blown addiction. Despite being warned by the team owner, Gene Wilbanks, Harris can't help himself in the days leading up to the test, fully aware of the consequences of producing a positive sample. It is the owner of all people who steps in to bail Harris out. In many ways, the owners are the people who hold the most power in the NFL. It is they who can influence the rules of the sport and dictate who the commissioner is. So when the owner of the Cougars is portrayed to be a nasty piece of work, it should come as no surprise that it didn't go well in NFL circles. Gene Wilbanks wants wins, and he wants his shiny new running back on the field, so he takes it upon himself to ensure that no positive drug test will get in the way. After receiving the tip-off from the boss, Harris undergoes a painful medical procedure to insert clean urine into his bladder, which is crazy in itself, but it works. The star running back manages to stay out of trouble, but not for long. Gene Wilbanks' desire to keep his players on the field by dodging the rule of law was effective, but it did nothing to help his young player battle the grasp of a drug addiction. Later in the series, the same corrupt owner can be seen demanding the coach find a way to get Harris in the game, despite the fact that Harris is not in any fit state to be anywhere near a football field as a result of drug withdrawal symptoms. But the message from up top is to simply find a way to get him on the field. The message that the creators of Playmakers were trying to get across was obvious. The owner was taking no time to consider the well-being of his players, instead only thinking of the results for his team. This is certainly not an image that the NFL wants to resonate with its fans, and another reason why team owners were not best pleased with ESPN's newest drama. The NFL's higher-ups were starting to lose patience with the hit series. After only 2 episodes, Playmakers had already ticked off recreational drug usage, performance-enhancing drugs, post-traumatic stress, and the burden of injuries. But it decided to step it up in episode 3 with the inclusion of domestic violence and murder. Harris's friend is found guilty of murder, landing him in a sticky situation in which he has to choose between his friends and his team. The storyline provided great drama for the show, but once again, it didn't do any favors in regard to its reputation with the league. Featuring a star player who was involved in covering up a murder, it is not exactly portraying football players in the greatest light. Harris' running back competition, Leon Taylor, also ends up in a bit of trouble in the 3rd installment. Following the disappointment of losing the starting job to Harris, Taylor is hoping that the Cougars can find a trade partner so that he can go and play somewhere else. Taylor is excited by the opportunity, but his wife doesn't like the idea of moving. Player trades and team transactions produce some of the most exciting talking points among fans of the sport, but the impact that this can have on the family is yet another byproduct of professional sports that is often forgotten. An established life can be turned on its head by the decisions made in the top offices of the NFL buildings. As we've seen in recent years with episodes of Hard Knocks, watching players being told they're being cut or traded was one of the most talked about moments during the NFL preseason. But those watching forget that those decisions can turn a player's life upside down. Playmakers made sure to unveil the true consequences of these moves. With tensions flaring between Leon and his wife, the veteran running back ends up pushing his wife in a move that sends her flying down a small staircase in their house. A busted lip and injured wrist was met with immediate sympathy from Taylor, but domestic abuse had now made its way into the program. It is unfortunately a topic that is all too familiar with the NFL and with pro athletes in general, as many players have found themselves serving suspensions for various levels of domestic abuse charges. The dramatization of it in Playmakers was a connection that even the most laid-back of fans can make. Incidents of domestic abuse have popped up regularly over the last few decades. NBC News' John Shoup reported in 2018 that 80 players have been arrested for domestic abuse over the previous 14 years. This has unsurprisingly attracted the attention of psychologists around America. Author Dr. Stanley Teitelbaum commented, "Elite football players are trained to be very aggressive and violent on the field. That's the nature of the game, and that's how they become important players. And sometimes, it's difficult for athletes to turn that off when they go back to their regular lives." Aside from the physical impacts of domestic violence, Playmakers does a good job of reminding people that these stories also produce weeks and months months of painful fallout and mental anguish. Leon Taylor and his wife's relationship is obviously tested to the max, but the route to protecting the player's public image proves even more complex. With his career on the line, Taylor and his wife attempt to cover the incident up by welcoming the press into their house for a sit-down interview. Eventually, the stress of it wears Taylor down, and he comes clean, resulting in legal issues and a potential suspension, something that is not unfamiliar in the NFL. Such is the accuracy with John Eisendrath and his writers, portraying the life of professional football players, that a similar storyline played out in real life over a decade later. Baltimore Ravens running back Ray Rice was ejected from the league after footage emerged of him punching and knocking out his now wife Janae in an elevator. Just like Leon Taylor and his wife in Playmakers, but under slightly different circumstances. Ray Rice and his wife invited the press into their kitchen for a sit-down interview. The couple discussed with the reporter why they felt the incident had happened and how they had moved on from it. The crimes of Ray Rice are far worse than that of Leon Taylor's and Playmakers, but the comparisons are amazing to see. Of course, the vast majority of players are perfectly fine human beings, and Playmakers does a good job of showing that even those who are guilty of domestic abuse are not always bad people. Taylor's actions are not out of character for a man who is generally portrayed to be a good husband, father, and man. Nevertheless, it is another clear point of contention for the NFL, who are wary of protecting the way that people view the league. The show's authentic portrayals of the challenges faced by athletes are what made the show so challenging. It brought about plenty of praise, but also its fair share of discomfort from organizations, including the NFL. Another big topic addressed by the show is homosexuality. Wide receiver Thad Gershowitz is shown to be living a double life during the early parts of the series. Afraid of what his teammates may think of him, Gershowitz opts to keep his private life hidden and even proposes to a woman as part of his cover. A rumor had spread that a gay player was on the team, and he felt the proposal was the only way to protect himself. Unfortunately for him, his boyfriend doesn't take too well to being covered up and outs Gershowitz in front of the whole team, putting his future with the Cougars in jeopardy. In a television program that tackles every controversy that you can think of, it should come as no surprise that John Eisendrath felt the need to include a homosexual player. He had already expressed his fascination with writing about male relationships in such a unique environment, and the addition of a gay player into the locker room gave him so much space to explore. In his interview with Vice, Eisendrath said, "That storyline was a simple manifestation of how does someone deal with who they are when who they are is frowned upon in the world that they're living in. Life becomes much harder for Gershowitz after a secret is revealed. Players on the team who are not accepting of the gay community make their thoughts known, as Thad receives a pummeling in practice. Dangerous passes and motivated tacklers bring to life the phrase hospital ball, leaving the wide receiver bloodied and bruised after practice. Insult is added to injury as another helpful intrusion from owner Gene Wilders leads to Gershowitz being asked to go on IR so as not to be a distraction to the team. It took until 2021 for the first gay player, Carl Nassib, to officially come forward in the NFL. Of course, the focus of the show is a fictional team who competed in a league that is fittingly named The League. It was filmed in Canada and shares no recognizable similarities to the NFL, aside from the sport that is being played. Whilst no branding could be mistaken for being even remotely close to the huge names that participate in the actual NFL, the storylines that were portrayed in fiction in the show have seen real-life sequels in the professional game. For example, defensive lineman Michael Sam was the first openly gay player to be drafted in 2014. After being cut just weeks later, many look at the attitude towards Gershowitz and Playmakers as an explanation as to why Sam never managed to find another team. Similarly, the Leon Taylor domestic abuse incident draws parallels with that of Ray Rice and his wife, who sat down with an interviewer in their kitchen 10 years after the publication of the show. We can also see real-life comparisons to Demetrius Harris's efforts to avoid the drug enforcement officer. Whilst Harris was successful, the same cannot be said of former Super Bowl MVP edge defender Von Miller. In an attempt to avoid producing a positive test, Miller was found to have colluded with a test collector to substitute his urine sample for a clean one. The pair would have gotten away with it had another collector not spotted that Miller was not present in the city where his collection was meant to take place. As a penalty, Miller was suspended for 6 games of the 2013 season. Another real-life comparison can be found if we take ourselves back to episode 2 of Playmakers, when we saw the Cougars' hobbled quarterback, Derek McConnell, popping his painkillers as if they were candy. Thankfully, he is spotted by the team's doctor, who not only tests him for his injuries, but warns him of his painkillers. The doctor finds that the painkillers have started to damage McConnell's liver, which leads him to demand the quarterback be placed on the inactive list to recover. Head coach Mike George doesn't take well to the news. He argues that he does not want to risk the team's season based on the doctor's concerns that his quarterback's health might be in danger. He attempts to dismiss the doctor's recommendations as mere theories, as the theme of team success over player welfare rears its ugly head yet again. In the instance of this particular part of Playmakers, Eisendrath does suggest that he was inspired by real-life events for his storyline. When asked about it by Vice, he references Shaquille O'Neal, who had recently sworn off painkillers after teammate Alonzo Mourning was found to have a kidney disorder. He would eventually go back to using them, but only after a very public falling out with the drugs. In 2000, Ray Lewis got caught up in an altercation after a party, where 2 victims were stabbed to death. Lewis and 2 of his friends were arrested on suspicion of the murder, which sounds very similar to the controversial situation that Demetrius Harris ends up in the early parts of Playmakers. In the story, Harris is involved in covering up a murder, and in real life, Ray Lewis admitted to obstructing justice. Lewis was sentenced to 12 months probation and given a $250,000 fine by the NFL, but was celebrated as the Super Bowl MVP just 1 year later. Eventually, all the suspects were acquitted, but Lewis still faced pressure from families who felt he hadn't come clean with everything he knew about the incident. The bottom line is that the history of the NFL is littered with examples of controversy that can be directly compared to the dramatic storylines in Playmakers. Whether it is players taking their aggression home with them, players opting for performance-enhancing drugs to help them through, or internal pressure causing players to play through injury, Playmakers depicts it all with frightening accuracy. In reality, it was always just a matter of time before the NFL stepped in and had its say. Despite gaining a dedicated fan base, Playmakers faced an early demise. After just 1 season, ESPN decided to cancel the series, citing pressure from the NFL and concerns about its impact on the league's image. Nevertheless, the show's legacy lived on. At the point of cancellation, Playmakers was ESPN's 3rd highest rated TV show. It had gripped fans who were fascinated by the drama and were lapping up the opportunity to consume American football in a different form. The show won the top TV series at the American Film Institute TV Awards and the Outstanding Drama Series Award at the GLAAD Media Awards. There is no doubt that John Eisendrath and his team had produced the winner, and praise was coming from elsewhere in the industry as well. According to the New York Times, Playmakers was well written and well acted, showing professional football as observed by John Didion rather than John Madden. Some players even backed the show, with Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Donovan McNabb becoming the biggest name to endorse it. The show shared the fascinating complexities that face a professional team and the individuals within it, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that some players were happy with it. They come out as the heroes and the victims of the story, who are at the mercy of coaches, under pressure, and heartless owners who care only about reputation and success. Every good story needs a villain. The owner stands out as a cold, selfish, and entitled character who prioritizes his personal gain over the health and well-being of those who do his bidding. It is his players that can bring him success, but it is them that he has the least respect for. From actively covering up crimes to promoting discrimination in his organization, Gene Wilder's is the clear bad egg in ESPN's Playmakers, which goes a long way toward explaining why the show met an early end. The show simply shared too many close parallels with the real-life NFL. Players were constantly found to be in situations of turmoil, and more often than not, it was the owner or the pressures of the league that landed them there. In the eyes of the NFL, the show's popularity was a risk. Not only did players not like being painted as the bad guys, but they felt that the league's reputation could be tarnished by the point of loss and revenue. If advertisers started to feel conflicted about their association with the NFL, the professional game could be in danger. And more importantly, the pockets of wealthy owners could become lighter. To that point, Gatorade, who had been sponsoring Playmakers, withdrew its sponsorship prior to the season finale being aired. The distaste around the league started to boil over, with many owners letting their feelings being known. Philadelphia Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie told the Philadelphia Inquirer, "How could Disney like it if Minnie Mouse were portrayed as Pablo Escobar and the Magic Kingdom as the drug cartel?" Eager to please the owners and not risk further upset, the commissioner of the NFL at the time, Paul Tagliabue, started to make his presence felt. After apparently being angered by seeing a trailer for the show during the league's preseason Hall of Fame game, he came down hard on ESPN and banned them from advertising it during games. Unfortunately, this didn't have the desired effect, as the show's popularity continued to rise. Negative reactions continued to come from within the NFL, including Tagliabue's biggest statement of distaste for the show. He told Cable News Network that everyone feels that it's a rather gross mischaracterization of our sport. NFL Network's Deion Sanders was also heard admitting that it showed the dark side of the NFL. The creators of the show always stated that the storylines were never based on real players and that they never benefited from leaked information. As much as they wanted to fight their case, there was enough fury from the league that the end was inevitable. Eventually, the president of ESPN at the time, Mark Shapiro, had no choice but to come out with a statement that essentially admitted defeat. "It's our opinion that we're not in the business of antagonizing our partner, even though we've done it and continue to carry it over the NFL's objections," he said. "To bring it back would be rubbing it in our partner's face." The choice of words is interesting here. Whilst the NFL would never admit to telling ESPN to pull the show, Shapiro's statement makes clear that the network was operating in conflict with objections from the NFL. It sounds almost like an apology from someone who has been told to get in line behind closed doors. Many years later, in 2023, The Athletic reported that an anonymous former NFL executive had all but confirmed to them that the NFL was behind the cancellation. They told The Athletic that the NFL didn't need to explicitly order the cancellation, merely ask ESPN if they wanted to throw dirt in the eye of the hand that feeds you. Following the Super Bowl of the 2003 season, John Eisendrath and his team were informed that their hit show was no more. An average of 1.6 million people had tuned into each of the 11 episodes, and ratings were high, but pressure from the NFL proved terminal. There would be no second season. The NFL were quickly vindicated for their decision, as Pro Bowl players let their feelings be known. Jets center Kevin Mawae told ESPN that they took every worst case scenario, put them all on the same team, and unfortunately, a lot of people that don't really know about football thinks that's what we're all about. In the same report, Ray Lewis was quoted as saying, "That show doesn't mean nothing. That shows nothing about us." John Eisendrath was unsurprisingly staunch in his defense of the show. He theorized that the NFL had intimidated ESPN into canceling the show, and that the network had simply backed down. Given that ESPN's Mark Shapiro statement about the cancellation included the line, "Many considerations went into this decision, not the least of which was the reaction from a long-time and valued partner," I think it is fair to agree with our angry director. However, can he really be surprised? He can be proud of his ability to write a successful TV show, but he shouldn't be surprised that ESPN felt pressure to shut it down. In writing a gripping portrayal of a life within a professional sports team, Eisendrath stumbled across some of the NFL's darkest secrets and broadcasted them in the worst possible light. With corporate reputations and commercial relationships on the line, it was only a matter of time. Money normally tends to win. Despite its tricky end, Playmakers paved the way for a new era of sports television. It showed that there was an audience hungry for a look at life in the locker room, and many shows have tried to capture that waiting audience ever since. For all of its controversy, Playmakers proved that there was a market for this kind of sporting insight. The industry learned from the drama, and the result has been a remarkable array of sporting entertainment. Aside from the new examples of sporting television shows that have since graced our screens, the Playmakers saga also set a precedent for a darker reality. It proved the power that the biggest organizations have in limiting creative freedoms. In 2013, the New York Times reported that NFL representatives had successfully pressured ESPN to cancel a new TV documentary called Lake of Denial. The documentary was based on a book written by ESPN reporters Mark Guada and Steve Finaro, looking into concussions in the NFL and the negligence of the NFL in addressing the issue. Obviously, this is another clear example of a television program that could damage the reputation of the NFL, and the New York Times report suggested that they once again managed to apply pressure to take it off the airwaves. Just like with Playmakers, the NFL denied doing so, but does anyone really believe them? The Playmakers saga is a story of the battle between creative freedom and the power of corporate influence. In the end, it should come as no surprise that the winners were the ones with the deepest pockets and the most to lose.